This podcast is part of the SJ Network. Go to s-j-network.com for more great podcasts and for contact information on publicist Steve Joyner.
You are listening to In a City Like Yours, a semi-monthly podcast featuring interesting people with interesting life stories. This podcast may contain language and/or subject matter not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm your host, Michael Glenn Moore. If you have an interesting life story and would like to appear on the show, please drop me a note at inacitylikeyours@gmail.com. Also, join our Facebook page at In a City Like Yours Podcast to receive notices of new releases and other info. Now, please welcome today's guest.
My name is Dale Niehaus, and I live in Norman, Oklahoma. Back in 2013, back when I actually originally from Indiana, southern Indiana, it was on Labor Day that year. And I was basically out in where I lived in southern Indiana. You could burn trash on your property as long as you had it contained. And so we had a section in the backyard where we kind of had like this burn trash pile. And then we also had a burn barrel. And so that day I was taking the process of burning some trash at the time and burned a little bit of it, but the fire went after a while, or so I thought. And so I wanted to try to burn up some more. And so trying to light it at first was not working. So I had before used a little bit of gasoline to try to burn stuff before. And so I had started to take the can of gasoline and started to pour down the barrel. And, you know, at first everything was fine, which I probably should have stopped after a little bit, but I kept pouring. And then the next thing I know, it ignited again, and the gas can, it caught on fire. And so my reaction to seeing that is I dropped it. Well, in the process of doing that, I was wearing jean shorts at the time, and I was wearing socks and shoes. And in the process of that, how my body was positioned, the gas was on fire. It splashed up and landed on the back side of my right leg. And so the back side of my right leg caught completely on fire. And that lasted for maybe 10 seconds or less. Then this was a bigger yard. So my at the time, 2013, how old was he then? A 4 or 5 year old was actually playing on the trampoline, which was further away from that. Okay. So as soon as he seen that happen, I after I put the fire out with water, because I did have a water hose nearby just in case their fire kind of broke out. And because, you know, anytime you're burning anything in the backyard, it could spread, and we had woods nearby. So I had put the fire out with water because it was the nearest thing I could think of. And I told him to go in and get his mom right away. And so he had went up there. I had made sure the fire was out, and the adrenaline was still kicked in, so I didn't feel anything. So I slowly tried to walk up to the house, and then that's when I noticed my leg was hurting really bad. At the time, I thought that maybe perhaps, that my leg was okay, that I just was missing a lot of hair. And then as I started going up the house more and more, the pain started to set more and more. She came out, and I expressed what happened, and so tried to get me into the shower to wash some of it off, which was extremely excruciating. And so we got me over to the hospital, the ER, where they admitted me and took a look at it. And then by that time, the hand that I'd put the fire out with, the fingers were swelled up like about the size of sausages. It was basically from water and different things. And so they got me in there, and they looked at the wound, and they treated it, washed it off the best they could, and then put some Silvadine cream, which is very notoriously used for treating burns, and they wrapped my hand up too. And then I was scheduled to go see a doctor and also start going to whirlpool treatment baths after it had healed for, about a week later. And so every day at home, I would have to redo the wrapping a couple times a day with burn cream. And then also they had tools to kind of, not the first week, but after I started doing whirlpool treatment baths, tools to actually debrief the wound, which basically means you had to take the dead skin off. And so at first, I had a tattoo back there, and right after it happened, this dead skin was still there, and the tattoo was still there. And then slowly, as we kept changing the gauze and the bandages and stuff, that the black outline of it started to disappear, and it got to a point to where it was completely gone. That's how bad it got burned. It was 2nd and 3rd degree burns on my back of my leg, and so then at a point it showed down to the white, the muscle, and so then I started taking whirlpool treatment baths, and I thought that I'd been hurt before. I'd sprained my ankles. I had been landed on my head. I had cut myself pretty bad. I thought, hey, I've been through pain, whatever, but this was nothing like I'd ever experienced. I mean, those whirlpool treatment baths were excruciating. My ex-wife now, who was married with me at the time, went with me with a couple of the appointments, actually sat in there, and just I broke down crying like a baby, just and in pain, and trying not to scream. It about broke her heart just to see me go through it. And so basically what it consisted of is they had this, at the time their actual electrical lift didn't work, so they had one that they actually had a pump crank. So as they would, there was this pool of warm water that they would stick you in, and so the pump thing, it would like cause it to, they'd pump it and it would cause it to jerk a little bit, so it definitely didn't help the leg thing. And then they would stick you in the water, and they would have this whirlpool water, this water that would move, and it would circulate around to clean the wound, which was horrible. It got worse as more of the dead skin would come off. The worst part of it is coming back out of the water, because your skin is wet, and then the air hitting it. That was horrible. And so then they would take these tools, whatever, and they would actually clean the dead skin off of the area. And it was horrible. I did that for about a month and a half, 2 months. I would go in twice a week for whirlpool treatments. And at first, I couldn't walk on my leg. It was the most excruciating pain of all, trying to put weight back on it. And eventually, I had to start to force myself to learn how to walk again, basically. I mean, came to a point where I had to learn to walk again. And at this time, I was off of work. I couldn't work at all. Luckily for me, I had short-term disability insurance at my job, so I was getting not a whole amount of pay, but I was getting some. And so I basically, every day I kind of had to slowly put my weight back on it, and then do things here and there. And then also through that point too, I was still serving in the Guard. And I remember that first month after this happened, I still had to report to guard duty for the weekend. And I showed up that first day, and it was absolutely horrible. I had to get stuff that had to, treat my wound or whatever. And then at the end of the day, they finally realized that, how bad it was. And they just went ahead and sent me home for the weekend. They're like, there's nothing more he can do right now. Just tell my first sergeant just to have him send me home for the weekend, because there was nothing else that could be done. So they finally did. And so I only had to stay for 1 day of drill. But then, come back and just, poor wife at the time, I was extremely irritable for the pain mostly, and just overall feeling of how stupid I was for what I'd done. And, kids at the time, that was after we had our, I think our youngest child, it was 2013. So he would have been a little over a year old, not very old. And so my poor wife at the time had our 3 kids, and the other one, like I said, was between 4 and 5. And then my oldest would have been about 10, 2013. Yeah, he would have been about 10. And then, of course, our littlest one. So she was basically having to take care of 3 kids while I was pretty much incapacitated. And so it finally, after 4.5 months going, doing all that, I finally was able to go back to work. And that was a thing going back too, because I had to climb stairs. And so my leg wasn't at 100% yet. So it took some getting used to going back to work, and eventually I was fine. And even to this day, I still don't have a lot of hair back there. I have some growing back, but I have a lot of the skin, it healed back, but not 100%. In fact, a lot of it, it's just weird looking, like when my leg like bends or flexes, you can see kind of like the wrinkles in the skin or whatever from where the skin kind of healed, but it's not the same. But that right there, the accident, it changed me. And the fact that I learned that, that in a second, something tragic could happen. I had literally thought when my leg was on fire, I literally thought my life was over. I was panicking. I was just overall just preparing for the worst, because I didn't know what was going to happen. And luckily for me, I survived, and I came back, and I didn't lose my leg or anything like that, which it could have been a lot worse. And it also had taught me that to be more careful. Gasoline is no joke. And even though I thought I was being careful, I wasn't. And so that's nothing to play with. And it also, in a sense, gave me a little PTSD, because I was doing something for a job once, and they were doing a safety video. And on this video, it was this guy that had been through an actual fire and burned. He was I want to say he wasn't a firefighter, but his body had like suffered an enormous amount of 2nd and 3rd degree burns. I mean, this poor guy, he'd been through the ringer. And when he talked about the whirlpool baths that he had to go through, as soon as he got done, or as he was talking about it, I started noticing my chest was beating faster, and I started to just get these overall panic feelings, and I had to leave the room before I broke down crying, just because it kind of made me relive what I went through. And so to this day, it's better to where I can actually talk about it and think about it. But every once in a while, it kind of causes some of it to flare up, just the anxiety and depression, which I kind of had some of it before, but when that happened, it definitely caused it to step up a notch, and it definitely made me more anxious, deal with more depression. For several years, I kind of just didn't face the fact that I was having issues, and it caused a lot of problems in my marriage. Not so much that at the time that it caused it to end. I mean, now it's over, but it's a lot of other factors, but that had a lot to do with it. Because I didn't face the fact that I had problems and I needed help. And of course, during that time when I was down, and there was a lot of times that I debated and dealt with suicidal thoughts, because, it was this terrible thing that happened to me. And I was just wondering, like, great, I almost screwed up and all this and that. And so you have all these thoughts going through your head of okay, every bad thing that, possible. And it's definitely one of those to where you're sitting there just thinking, and thinking can be a good, but it can be a very dangerous thing, especially when you're having a lot of bad thoughts in your own head, and then you become your own worst enemy. And so it's definitely one of those things that I experienced it, and it's definitely nothing I would want to experience again. Just obviously the fire part, but the pain of going through that, the whirlpool treatments was traumatizing. And for anybody who has ever been through a fire accident, and whatever wound they have, they had to go through these treatments. And I can't imagine that guy in the video who his whole body had been burned at one point, and his whole body had to be debriefed and go through whirlpool treatments. I couldn't imagine that. It was just the back of my leg. So anybody who has ever had to go through those whirlpool treatments, I feel for them extremely bad, because it's, people can talk about pain, or they got cut or they broke an arm or something, but I'm telling you that right there is a new level of pain that I feel for anybody that ever had to feel it. So it definitely caused me to want to be more cautious in my life, and to try to, and it also kind of, and not at the time, it didn't, I didn't start to think about my dreams and my passions as much, but it definitely caused me to also think about things I hadn't done yet, that if I would have gotten killed that day, then what all would I have accomplished? I was a father and husband, but I basically just worked a regular job and didn't really have any ambitions at that point. And so in a sense, it might have caused my thinking to change a little bit, and it may have not changed right that second, but I think it kind of started to make a change in my head of, okay, well, where's my life going? What am I doing? What have I accomplished? And so I don't like the fact that I went through what I did, but I also think too that by going through that, it did maybe cause me to be motivated to do different things in my life. And so if that's the good that came out of it, but really there's no good way to look about when you're going through a bad burn like that. And so, but it definitely made me more cautious of fire safety, and to not utilize gasoline or anything other than for cars or trucks, or for, lawnmowers, or what are supposed to be used for. And so I guess if anything, it definitely taught me that, and to just love my kids more.
Yeah,
And,
that's apparently a common thing with people using gasoline on fires, it backing up like that and catching the can.
Yeah.
Did you have any problems with the muscle trying to draw up? Was that part of it as well? And where you didn't have any skin grafts either, did you?
No, surprisingly, I didn't. They were thinking they were going to have to at first, but to be honest, no, they didn't have to do any skin grafts at all. My skin actually started to grow back, because we actually kept the area clean and we took good care of it. At first, they honestly thought that I was going to have to get skin grafts, but luckily for me, no, I didn't. In fact, my skin all grew back. It's just, you can just definitely tell, because however you bend my leg, you can see the lines where like the skin kind of grew back, but it's kind of weird because it kind of almost looks like wrinkled in those areas, and also just kind of like really dry. And you can see that, and you can actually see the line on the back of my leg, and it doesn't go all the way down like to my ankle necessarily, but it's kind of like part of the way up. You can see a permanent line right there to where the sock was at, and then you can see the line behind my knee to where it had kind of done it too. So it's just, but no, luckily for me, I did not have to have a skin graft. I was very, very fortunate, and I thank God every day for that.
Yeah, I've heard that burns are really, really painful. I know just burning my hand on the stove or something, how bad that is. I can't imagine having a significant, area, what that must have been like. Did they give you any painkillers, or, how much of this did you have to just bear?
Yeah, actually they had first given me lower tabs, which I had heard a lot of bad things about lower tabs. And so I didn't take those, but they did give me Percocet, which, that's not much better. So, but I didn't know much about Percocet. Lower tabs, I know that they were definitely a habit for me. And so but the Percocets I did take at first, and they definitely helped. I had those, and I had the 800 milligram ibuprofen or Tylenol, whichever one at the time. So that helped manage it. And of course, had family members kind of help keep an eye on me when, the amount I was taking per day, because any type of painkiller like that that's strong, it can be habit forming. And, after a while, they were keeping an eye on me, and they're like, well, hey, maybe you ought to, settle down, or not settle. If you don't necessarily need to take that, maybe you ought to quit taking it. And so I quit taking the Percocet after a while, because I didn't want to become hooked on that. And I just took like the stronger dose of the Tylenol after the majority of the bereavements was done, and it was just skin growing back. So, but yeah, they did prescribe me some painkillers to kind of help subside the pain a little bit. Otherwise, it would have been absolutely horrible trying to deal with that for that whole time.
Oh, I'd imagine, it's a necessity to go through something like that and not have anything to help with the pain. So do you said you can kind of tell by looking at it that you've had something going on in the back of your leg, but there's no more residual effects. It's not, you don't limp or anything like that. You're kind of back to normal, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I don't have any limping at all. After the first 4.5 months, it still had a little bit of muscle where it hadn't been long enough for it to completely went into atrophy. But definitely my muscle in my right leg was a lot weaker than my left. But no, after I started getting back to work, and to subside the soreness in the leg from getting used to it again, no, there's no residual effects from it. I'm able to walk fine. I can work out with it fine. It's just back there, you can notice a little bit of difference, and no hair on the back of my leg. That's really about all there is. It's just cosmetic is all it is.
Okay. So let's go on and talk about your acting and voiceover career. When did you start your acting? Was this after one of the revelations that you had always wanted to do, and that's what you decided to do after you went through the burn? Or was that something you were going through or wanting to do before?
Since I was a kid, I had, it always been thought cool to be in a movie, and I think every kid kind of goes to that at one point, and I grew up an only child in southern Indiana. And so, a lot of times when I didn't play with toys or whatever, because this was the 80s, we had like the Nintendo and stuff. But a lot of times, I would watch a lot of movies, especially when I was old enough to watch myself and stay home and do chores. A lot of times during summer vacation, I was home watching flicks and movies and stuff. And this was, for anybody who's not old enough to remember, it was on VHSs, video cassettes, and where you actually had to physically sit there and rewind the movie, and it took like a couple minutes, but so it was, kind of a childhood dream, but I didn't really start following that actually until 2015. And part of that too was because I had, kind of afterwards, yes, it was kind of something that I had like, well, I never tried it, so maybe I'd like to. But at the time in Indiana, there really wasn't a really any place to do it, especially in Evansville, where I grew up. And so I kind of didn't even look into it. And so it wasn't until 2015 when I moved to Oklahoma, and it was, later that year, closer to December, they had this casting notice at the library in Norman, and it was for a local play. It was by this local group called the Namron Players. It was just like a community theater, and that's Norman spelled backwards too, as they came up with that. And so they had auditions for this small play. It was the play version of Fahrenheit 451. And so I had debated, and I told my wife at the time, I was like, hey, I saw this, but I just don't know. And she's like, why not go for it? You seem like you'd have fun with that. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so I went out and read for the role of the lead, which I didn't get. I went out there, read for that, and they were like, okay, thank you for coming out. And kind of at first I was like, oh, that was horrible. I was so nervous, sweating bullets. Oh God. And then I got a call a couple days later, like, hey, we'd like you to come back in and reread for us. And so I went over to the director's house, and so I reread it, and he kind of directed me trying to do it a couple different ways. He's like, hey, we don't think that you the lead would be for you, just because of the fact I didn't have a lot of experience. And he's like, but we do have a supporting role as one of the firemen, and And then for anybody that wasn't the lead in the play, they all played like an extra person at the end. And so I did both of those. And so then we started to rehearse, which, I had never really been a part of anything like that. So I didn't truly realize all that was involved. And, at first when you started rehearsing, God, it was horrible, just because of the times we'd have to go in and we'd have to learn lines and the repetitiveness of it. And I'm not going to lie, when he first started rehearsing, I almost was like, is this a freaking mistake? And so we did all that. And then it was a couple months later, because we had to spread out the rehearsal times because of scheduling and stuff. And this was basically just like a community theater. It wasn't even like a regular theater. So we kind of just got together and practice here and there. And then I want to say it was April, because we didn't actually start rehearsing until like February, I think. So then April came and there was one night production. And so, we did a couple of run-throughs like before, and it was still nerve-wracking just being up there and quiet. And so finally the production night, we got up there and we did our thing, and there was a scene where me and another actor kind of had to react and to a certain thing, and the audience laughed. And but it was because we did something they thought was funny. And so, we went out along the whole play, and then of course we did our final things at the end, and then the audience applauded. And so then it was just that overall feeling of like, wow, really, what we did, they liked. And I really liked it. And then it kind of put all that stuff from before, like the repetitiveness and all that, kind of like, aside. And so then it had been, from that point, there was like they had a short film that they were casting for, which I'm good friends with the guys now, but at that time they had casted me for a smaller role in that, but the film never was able to take off. And so I had basically done nothing else until and in between that too, from people at the play to other people, I started networking and started connecting with others in the industry. And a friend of mine who I just met through networking had suggested me there was a local film that was being made that they needed extras for, which is basically just people. And if you look at a movie, and like any Tom Hanks movie, and you see like people maybe sitting in the background, but you don't kind of see who they are. It's just kind of like for filling up the background in a film. Well, that's basically what the extras are for. It's just to kind of fill in. So they needed extras. And so one of the days I was able to go to was in this like little chapel scene. And it was a pretty significant part of the film. And so I did that, and I realized like, I really like this. I want to do some more. And so the next month they had another local production, did a film, and I went out for 4 days as an extra. And I loved it so much that I started doing more and more and more. And 2017, I think I did a short film every month, which and then 2018, I did a lot to where it kind of caused the teetering towards the end of the marriage. But I loved acting so much after doing all that. I kept going with it. It became like an addiction, almost kind of an obsession, like, a good one. And just before you know it, I met so many different people, networked with so many different people, and it's kind of lifted me up to kind of where I'm at today.
Oh, that's excellent. So have you considered doing feature films, or would you have to leave Oklahoma, you think, to get into that?
There are some moving from Oklahoma. No, I'm that's not even an option now, because my ex and the kids are here, and I'm definitely not wanting to move away from Oklahoma because my kids are still little. I mean, I have a 17-year-old which will be graduating high school next year, but I have a 10-year-old and 7-year-old. So this is where they live. This is where they want to live. So no, I will still live in Oklahoma, but traveling, yes, I have a film that's coming up, and it is a feature that will require me to travel to Tennessee to film for probably 3 days. And But there was a production I did up in Newkirk, Oklahoma, called Hunting Jessica, and it's a supernatural series, and it's got the potential to take off like True Blood. So you don't necessarily have to move away from Oklahoma to be a successful actor. I mean, it does. I mean, for a lot of people, it has helped when they went out to the bigger cities. But what I've also heard too is people that have moved like to LA and New York and stuff, that the competition is extremely fierce out there and the cost of living is a lot higher. So I know a lot of people that are still even struggling today to get where they need to. But also too, now with a lot of technology, especially with COVID-19 going on, they've done a lot more video auditions because they haven't been able to do stuff in person. And so that has opened the doors for so many people to be able to reach out and get seen more than they would before. And I also have a Texas agent. I have an Oklahoma agent as well. And I went down and drove down to Austin for auditions before, and one of which was it was a national commercial that they were holding auditions for. And so I drove down there just one day for 30 minutes to audition and drove straight back, which is it takes over 5 hours and 20 minutes just to get there. And so you're talking about 30 minutes between. So you're talking about a good 12-hour day just for going down for one 30-minute audition. And I got a call back and drove back down, did the same thing. I fortunately did not get it, but the casting director was one who had been casted for some bigger projects, who was located down in Austin, and my name got on her radar too. So that could definitely be beneficial for the future. So yes, to be in some bigger films, a lot of them, I mean, they've had something come through Oklahoma. You may be required, I'll probably be required to travel to be in a lot of different ones, but it won't necessarily mean that I have to move away from here right now, because until my kids are all grown up and adult, I kind of really don't have that choice. And I wouldn't want to anyways, because I wouldn't want to be away from them, except when I'm working. So at least I kind of have that option right now.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I drove down to New Orleans a couple of times to audition for things, and it's about a 6-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
Go down there and do like you did, stay for like 45 minutes and then drive back. So it's doable. So,
oh, yeah.
So when did you get started in doing voiceover work?
What's kind of funny is the first thing I ever did out here was just a couple years ago, and it was just for a friend's small YouTube project. And the role I did, I was the only animated thing in that, and I was a talking broom called Sweeps. And so he was kind of the abused one in the group. Like, he was trying to be all sweet and kind, and everybody was just talking down to him, whatever. And so, but it was kind of in a funny way. But before then, I had basically in my previous jobs, like in 2016, when I was bored, or not 2016, oh my Lord. No, you're okay. It was like 2006. I'm getting my times mixed up. My God. Back when I worked, I used to work production on an assembly line. And so like at the end of the day, or like we were on downtime, whatever, and I was bored, I would, in between, like, because I had seen this as a kid watching like Broadway and everything, people growing up. And so even before then, I started to try to change the pitch of my voice, which at times was kind of did when nobody's watching, because I was like, okay, nobody can hear me do this, because it'll be horrifying if anybody knew I'd try to do that. And so I would try to change the pitch of my voice here and there, and even before then, like when I was in college, I would try to change the pitch of my voice to do like Cartman or Fat Bastard off of Austin Powers. And so down the production line, I would occasionally just try to think of a character and try to imitate his voice a little bit. And so it kind of was okay then, but it kind of also came out kind of not sound the greatest. And so I just kept doing it. And then I raised a little bit of money, and I got in contact with this guy down in Kentucky who he was able to, he had some audio recording equipment. And so me and him kind of came up with the script, and I did like a small like audio demo reel. That I put it on like voice123.com. And even going back hearing that then, some of the stuff I did on there, I'm like, oh, that wasn't the greatest, but apparently people liked it. So I kind of was kind of the start. And then kind of from there, I still kind of did it in this, just for fun, like at home or whatever. And then a couple years ago, like I said, I reached out and they said they needed somebody for this. So I did a kind of like not a higher pitch, but like a lighter pitch voice. And they're like, okay, we can definitely work with that. And then his brother did like a mashup of like a G.I. Joe series, just called Cobra. And it basically took like the old G.I. Joe cartoons and cut little bits and segments of the different cartoons and then added dialogue to where we dubbed it over with our own voices. And so I was talking to him. He's like, yeah, I really need to find somebody to do Cobra Commander. I'm like, okay. And so I was like, well, let me see if I can do that. So I went home and I started to work on it. And it was after watching a G.I. Joe cartoon. And so I did, with my phone, I recorded a little audio clip of me doing Cobra. And I sent it to him. And then not too long after, he's like, dude, that was great. He's like, yeah, you do Cobra for this. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do Cobra Commander. And so for that small YouTube series, which it didn't really do much, it was just kind of like a fun project. I ended up doing Cobra Commander. And so that was definitely fun. And it has definitely gotten people's attention, which I haven't done a whole lot with the voiceover part yet, which that's something now I'm going to be looking into real soon, because I actually got to get a computer for the house, for the apartment, and some good old audio recording equipment. But yeah, that's the voiceover part it's so much fun, just because of the characters that you can create with your voice, and just do the audio, and amazingly, what it can come out sounding like. And then people just like, oh my God, that was amazing. I'm like, really? Okay. Thank you. It still kind of blows my mind to this day, of acting or voiceover or anything else. Is like, hey, you were really good. I'm like, and I'm always the humble type to where I'm just like, I don't think so, but thank you. So, but it's just kind of the earlier things, like with Robin Williams and different people like that kind of inspired me to kind of do that.
Yeah, I interviewed a guest who did voiceovers too, and he did a lot of work with books on tape. And did really well with that. Is that something you would consider doing?
Yes, it is actually. A very good friend of mine who lives in Arkansas, who had told me that he does that. His name is Rick Viper. He actually has done quite a bit of books on tape, and so that's definitely, like I said, getting the equipment is kind of the part that I'm waiting on right now. But yes, once I get my equipment set up in my home studio, I definitely would love to do some audiobooks and do some more voiceover recordings and different things. So yes, that's voiceover work is actually was kind of a dream of mine before acting, just because of watching cartoons growing up. And then after a while, like as I got older, seeing like the behind the scenes and the actors doing that stuff. And I was like, man, that'd be cool to do, like, because I used to watch like Dragon Ball Z and stuff too. And I was like, that'd be cool to do voiceover for one of these cartoons, just like, everybody loves seeing these. And I was like, it'd just be so cool to change the pitch of your voice or something really cool like that to entertain people. And actually what's funny is I went to this little church function back, and this was probably in 2014. And they were having like this little talent skit, and it was out in the park and picnic, and anybody could sign up if they had a talent. And I was scared, but I put down, I'll do some voiceover over on the microphone. And I also did some kind of karaoke. I did Garth Brooks. And so I wrote up my own, like a little script. And I had to rewrite again because the handwriting was freaking horrible. And so my script basically was about was it Yogi Bear and Boo Boo that were going through the woods, and they were trying to find, I guess, a picnic basket, and then they encountered like this Elmo. They encountered Elmo and basically ran away because thought he was possessed, and then they kind of encountered like Kermit and a small group at this picnic, and so they kind of sat down and enjoyed it with them. And I did that in front of everybody, and they were cracking up as I was doing it. And they applauded me at the end, and I was like, wow, me changing the pitch of my voice and acting like a goofball made people laugh. Who would have thought? And at the time, God rest my ex on that, she was a good sport. I mean, there were a lot of times where doing my impersonation around the house just really annoyed the crap out of her. But she put up with a lot of it. So it kind of, doing that right there was kind of the icing on the cake of realizing that, hey, I apparently have a natural knack for this, because I mean, I've taken a few voiceover classes since then, but I mean, I haven't had a whole lot of extensive training in it, but a lot of it's just from self-taught. A lot of it's from just trying different things and doing that. And so it's, yes, definitely something that I'm going to look into, is doing books on tape, making more audio demo reels, better ones that I can submit to possibly get bigger and paid work. So yes, I'm definitely looking into doing more voiceover work professionally.
And that would work with you staying in Oklahoma. That's something you could do from anywhere, really.
Yeah, exactly. And you could do kind of any project, because I have friends of mine that do voiceover work from all over the world, and they submit it to different companies, different things. And some of them are very successful and make really good money at it. And yeah, that's definitely between my acting gigs, because after this whole thing blows over, I've got at least 3 or 4 projects lined up that are ready to start shooting. It's just a matter of waiting for all of us to be able to get out and be around each other again.
Yeah, that was my next question. If you had some things coming up down the line, so you do have some stuff, but you can't talk about them yet because they're in production.
Well, no, I can talk about a few of them. I recently was cast in a fan film, and it's called Freddy vs. Jason Dreamscape. And basically it takes place kind of back to when Jason and Freddy were in hell. So I know they had the Freddy vs. Jason film that came out in 2010, which, it was good. There's so many things that could have been done different in that story. So this kind of goes back, before, like around the same time, but it basically is telling a different story. In a sense, but it's basically to where, by some circumstances, which my character that's in it plays a part in helping to bring Jason back to life, because I'm a dumbass in the film. And so he, of course, is brought back, and then Freddy, of course, has his claws somehow involved in that. And there's this lead character, this boy that's a teenager, around 17. He was also played by a local Oklahoma actor named Spencer Trammell. And so he basically travels back and forth in the dream realm to where eventually it'll play some major part in the film. And then there's, I know there's at least one name that makes an appearance in there. Not the actor Heather Lugenkamp, but the character Nancy from the Nightmare series, who's there in the process of doing auditions for casting for that. And since this is a fan film, then they can't really have any SAG actors and actresses necessarily participate, because obviously the budget. So that that fan film is going to be made. That's the one that's going to be made in Tennessee, which I'll have to travel out of. But they're looking at getting that filmed as soon as this COVID-19 is over with, and as soon as they raise the rest of the funds, which they're, I believe, close to 32% funded, and they got about 33 hours left on the first campaign, and they're going to be starting up a second one to get the rest of the funds raised. But the executive producer and also the consultant on the Freddy character, his name is Blake Best. He actually has written some amazing books. He wrote a book about the characters, about the 4th movie, The Dream Warriors, and he actually knows quite a bit of the cast from that. A lot of like the characters are in that, and Blake has some props that they had used, like the I believe it was film number 3. The Dream Master, I believe, is where Freddy's, it has his arms that are like really long and stretched, expanding down the hallway. He's got those like the arm props that they used that he'll actually bring out at conventions. And he's also got a mask that was made for the first Nightmare film that the stuntman actually, it was made for him to wear he, like for the more scenes that involved a lot of like dangerous stunt work. They would use the stunt guy rather than Robert. And so Blake actually has a mask that was kind of made for that it kind of fits on the face. And so he'll actually occasionally show that too. And then the writer of the film, and also the writer and also a producer, his name is Joshua Adams. He actually wrote the script, and he also is the one playing Freddy. And so he's got a whole knowledge of Freddy as well. And then the director of the film, his name is Cody Huskins, who he is also playing Jason Voorhees. He has been involved in the acting world since he was little. His grandfather and father, I believe, were both actors. His father was actually in the Delta Force 2 movie. If I'm correct, what he was showing me, that the scene, I guess, where Chuck was got from the balcony to the bedroom, and the door opens, and the first guy that walks through that Chuck deals with that doesn't talk, that's his father in that. And then he's also a Jason cosplayer. He's got, I don't know how many different Jason outfits that he has made and put together. He's even got like the number 7 one where he's got the disfigured face under the mask. He's got all kinds of stuff. So he's playing Jason, and he's, I want to say 6'4". He's big, and he's like a mountain of man. He's perfect. He's around basically the perfect Jason, because he's basically around Hodder's height, Kane Hodder height and size. So it's a fan film. So I mean, obviously we're not making a profit, which doesn't break the rules about using the characters' names from the film, because it's a fan film, and they're wanting to raise the profits to put into some other ones, because they've got like an origin story Freddy they're wanting to make. They've got some other ones, and so it's definitely promising to look like, and it's a feature. So it's gonna, I really believe this, the way the script was written, it's an amazing story, and I truly think it's going to be a good tribute to not only the fans of the series, but if by chance, because I know Blake has who has talked to Robert before at fan festivals and everything else, and I'm sure that once this is completed, that he might see if Robert Englund might actually would like to look at the film just to show him, that, hey, the fans that made this film for fans, and see if Robert gets a kick out of it.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about that you hadn't brought up yet?
There's some other projects laying, which I could talk about for hours. There's other projects that are coming up. And obviously probably more and more that are going to be added on. No, I think we covered quite a bit tonight, just with the accident, and then talking about the beginning to my acting, and then talking about the fan film. So I think,
yeah, we've got 50 minutes. So that's
oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty good length. And it seemed like it went by really fast too. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I know that usually, that went by 50 minutes. Really went by that quick. Holy wow.
I like it when that happens. So, yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm going to need from you now is any of your links that you want me to put in the show notes, like for your social media, YouTube pages, and anything like that you want to share, and an image of yourself that I can use for advertising and
sure.
in my social media.
Absolutely. I'll be glad to send those to you. Okay.
And I will let you know when this is released. I'll send you an email with links to get to it, and links to my social media where I post it, so that you can look at it and share it with your friends and so forth.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay, Dale. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And good luck on your future work. It sounds like you've got quite a bit coming up, and pretty exciting. I know the fan film sounds very interesting. So, kind of keep us posted when that comes out. Maybe we can do an addendum.
Oh, absolutely. And most definitely. And I'm sure that once it comes out, that the director, the three main guys that are involved that did the auditioning and stuff, Cody and Joshua and Blake, the main ones doing this film, I'll definitely mention something to them, and I'm sure that they, one or all three, would love to be able to also come on and talk about the project, especially Blake, who is any knowledge about the Nightmare films. That man is a fountain. He knows almost everything there is to know, especially about film number 4.
Okay, that sounds good.
I will definitely keep you posted.
Yeah, give him my info. That'd be great. Okay, well,
yeah,
I will talk to you later, and you take care.
You too, sir.
I want to give a shout out to Ben, the editor of this show. Ben also has a podcast called 2 Marks and a Spark. You can find it wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Check it out. You won't be sorry.